Welcome to Biztech's C-Suite Conversation Show. Workiva Inc. is a New York Stock Exchange listed global software as a service company headquartered in Iowa in the United States. It provides a cloud-based connected and reporting compliance platform that enables the use of connected data and automation of reporting across finance, accounting, risk, and compliance. Now, to tell us more about this interesting company, our guest today is Erik Saito. He's the Senior Vice President and General Manager, EMEA and APAC at Workiva. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. It's very nice to be on the show. Thank you.
Now, Erik, for a start, give us an overview of Workiva and your role.
Absolutely. Thank you again. It's a pleasure to be here. Workiva is a software as a service company that's based on the cloud. And we have developed a software that enables companies to increase their productivity and efficiency of reporting and governance from financial reporting, ESG reporting, as well as governance, risk, and compliance. We have about 2,700 employees around the world, including here in EMEA, where I'm sitting today, as well as Asia Pacific. And we have 18 offices. And we have been around for about 15 years and a listed company for 10 years on the New York Stock Exchange. We serve Office of the CFO, Office of the Chief Sustainability Officer, as well as the Office of the Chief Operating Officer of many companies around the world. We have over 6,000 organizations that use our platform across all those use cases. And we have roughly 80% of the S&P 500 that are using our platform.
Now, when I was doing research about your business, three key things came out. It's about connecting data, unifying processes, empowering teams. Those three themes really kind of came out. Tell us about how your solutions blend all that and how you help your customers and users.
Absolutely. The traditional and old processes that companies use for reporting and governance is fundamentally disconnected. I myself used to be the CFO of an S&P 500 US company, and I experienced that myself. You have source systems, transaction, and enterprise resource systems that capture the data across your business. And then when you have to report that, you have to extract your data that you need for reporting from all those disparate systems, and then map them into a format that you need to report based on the compliance requirements of the jurisdictions that you're operating and the regulations that you are regulated by. That fundamental disconnection creates a lot of manual work for companies' employees because humans have to find a way to apply judgment on how they can extract that data and then map it across in the way that is intelligible and useful and valuable for their stakeholders that are consuming that report. The second problem that companies have is the lack of ability to collaborate. Fundamentally, these reporting and governance processes require many different departments and teams to work together. But the traditional software systems that are out there doesn't allow that to happen very easily. So people have to collaborate manually by sending documents back and forth, by emailing each other, by calling each other. So all of these things create a lot of pain and a lot of inefficiencies for companies in these processes. So there was a space, an opportunity for a company like Workiva to come to the environment to provide something that actually enables those teams to work collaboratively and to extract the data and map it much more automated way.
And so, Erik, so here's the interesting thing. I actually went and looked at a demo of Workiva just to understand how the software works. And I'm from an enterprise technology background. So I understand the problems around with large companies and how compliance and governance is about as exciting for everyone as going to the dentist. It's about the same level of fear and trepidation that you deal with. What is your secret sauce? Why should I use Workiva? Because the demo made it seem really easy as dragging and dropping from your ERP or your CRM solution and so forth, your financial systems, dragging and dropping and then creating a new report. Tell us about this.
Absolutely. I love your analogy of going to the dentist. I felt the same way when I was in the role. It's something that is a necessary pain that companies have to go through, right? CFOs and CSOs are not sitting there every day thinking, how can I report my information? They're thinking about how can I run my business to sell more automobiles, to sell more televisions, to sell more services. So it's a necessary evil, and no one really wants to think about it or wants to do more with it. So you said it right. We came to the market to provide a solution to make that process as painless and as simple as possible. And one of the first things that really differentiates us is what you said, what you noticed yourself when you saw the demonstration, is how simple and intuitive it is. We purposefully made it so that anyone who's used to traditional software, like spreadsheets, like documents, like presentations, whatever tool they're using, we actually made it so that they have a very, very low barrier to entry in terms of learning. So all the usual steps that companies, teams are used to in providing their reports and governance, they don't have to learn a new skill. It's their exact skills are applicable to the Workiva platform. So our first secret sauce is making it simple and intuitive. The second secret sauce that we have is making it extremely automated. So one of the things that you may have noticed in our demonstration is a feature called linking. That is something that is fundamental to our value when we first introduced our product 15 years ago. And that's as simple as this, is when you update a number on a spreadsheet and you want to report that new number on a presentation. In traditional software, you would have to copy and paste that spreadsheet number, the new number, into a table or a chart in order for that presentation to be updated. In Workiva's case, through this technology, it's all linked. So the pie chart on your presentation is linked to the spreadsheet, which is then linked back to your enterprise resource planning system or HR system or greenhouse gas capturing system. So imagine that as your transaction systems and your ERP systems update, it automatically updates all of your spreadsheets, your calculations, as well as your pie charts, tables, bar charts, and bullet points. Something as simple, this is just one single feature of thousands of features that we continuously innovate in order to make it more and more automated. So that's our second secret sauce. The third secret sauce that we have as a company is how we deliver the platform. As you said, most companies enjoy enterprise technology as much as going to the dentist. Why? Because implementing the technology is extremely painful for most types of software. It takes months, it takes hundreds of resources, external advisors, and so on. The third secret sauce that we brought to the table is we made it extremely easy for companies to implement. In fact, most companies don't even call Workiva implementing, they call it setting it up, because we actually provide a software that's ready to be used, ready to go. And it's more akin to actually customizing something, the way something looks in your presentation or the way a calculation is done in the spreadsheet, but the features are already there. So there's nothing that you have to fundamentally change and implement about Workiva in order for your teams to start using it.
Now, I want to zoom in on one thing that you said just a few minutes ago, and it's around then a key important topic, which really, from a compliance standpoint, worries lots of companies today: ESG compliance. Now, how has that really, and how does Workiva really help companies in this area? Because this is something where, and I've heard this many times with senior management, oh, I've got to prepare this for the board, for our annual report. It takes us forever to get all the carbon capture information, as you just alluded to, Walk us through how Workiva kind of helps companies to do that, because that is increasingly required for regulatory, for stock exchange compliance as well.
Absolutely. So to step back for a minute, the reason why companies and office of the CEO, CFO, CSOs are concerned about ESG actually goes back to the fundamental principle of reporting in general. If you think about financial reporting, as you mentioned, for stock exchange, what is the foundation of that reporting? It's actually about trust, right? Because what does it matter if I report to you my company's data if you know that you can't trust my data? Why? Right. Because it has been wrong before, right? So you as an investor have to have that implicit trust that the information that I report to you for your consumption, for your ability to make decisions on whether or not to invest or divest my company among your portfolio, depends on whether or not you can trust me and my organization in providing accurate and trustworthy data to you. So in the financial reporting case, it took us roughly 4 decades in the financial community to ensure that there are internal controls in place and good governance in place in all the reporting processes, from transaction systems to reporting systems, to ensure that investors can trust the figures. And there's even, as you know, over the last 4 decades, companies have instituted internal audit teams, internal audit processes, so that we self-police ourselves on making sure that there's good governance. And of course, investors require that listed companies pay external auditors to check that information as well and check that the governance is in place. So these are all processes that took roughly 4 decades to develop in the financial reporting process. The interesting thing is that when Europe actually took the first step in ESG reporting governance, here in the EU, where I'm sitting today, CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, was passed last year. And when that passed, that actually created a new kind of urgency. Basically, what CSRD in the EU requires is the same level of governance on sustainability or non-financial data, right? Sustainability, social data on, for example, the diversity of employee base, or social contributions to the community, and then governance of those internal processes on reporting. The same amount of governance is being required, and assurance is being required in less than 10 years. So companies essentially have to get to the same standard that took them 40 years, roughly, to shrink that into 10 years. So therein lies the problem, is companies have been reporting sustainability data, for example, for decades already, right? Particularly manufacturing companies to the environmental protection agencies in their jurisdiction and other types of regulators. The difference now is that regulators are requiring that data to be assured, meaning that they require that the company demonstrate that, hey, we have good corporate governance in place to make sure that when I'm reporting to you how much my manufacturing plant is releasing, let's say, wastewater into the river, that I not only report that number to you, I demonstrate all the controls and governance that are in place so that you can trust that that wastewater discharge is measured accurately and is being checked by independent people, right? That I cannot manipulate, that I cannot influence, right? Like an external auditor, for example. So it's one thing for an external auditor to assure, let's say, accounts receivable information. It's quite another for an external auditor to have to assure that you have the right calculation for hydrochloric acid in your water. So this is the fundamental problem, is how do companies ensure that when we report that data, we can also simultaneously demonstrate that we have governance around the non-financial data?
That's interesting, Eric. So then it leads me to this next question. Given the increased complexity, not only of financial reporting, but regulatory compliance on various aspects, ESG included, what advice would you give boardrooms across the world in terms of how they need to deal with this complexity? And it's not around throwing resources at the problem.
That's a great question. If I were sitting in front of board members right now, what I would advise them to do to ensure that their executive teams are doing is ensure that their executive teams are thinking about the most efficient path to achieve that outcome. Why is that important? Because ESG is actually not about reporting. ESG is actually about how companies must transform their entire operation in order to do business more sustainably and more responsibly for the future. That's what's the fundamental principle of ESG and what these regulators are actually doing. So the reporting should be automated. Why? Because the company's executives and their teams should be spending time on thinking about and strategizing how they're going to transform their operations. I'll give you an example. If you're a manufacturing company, then necessarily in the manufacturing process, you're probably using labor, you're probably using raw materials, you're probably using energy, and you're probably discharging some kind of waste. So in all four of those areas, there's impact on the environment, impact on the community, impact on society. So the key is if, for example, the manufacturing company wants to achieve, let's say, a net zero target by 2050 or 2030, then what they ought to be thinking about, what the CFO, the CEO, and the CSO must be thinking about is how are we going to achieve that? For example, if they're currently, let's say their manufacturing plant is using coal-fired energy, brown energy, it's polluting the environment. In order for them to reach net zero target, they must transform that to a higher degree of green energy, let's say wind power or hydropower or solar power. That's not something that a manufacturing company can change overnight. That can take 10 years, it can take 5 years. But it takes a lot of resources and planning. And in the meantime, especially if they're a listed company, while they're changing out their process, they still have to deliver results.
Yes.
Right? So that balance requires an incredible amount of thought, incredible amount of planning. And so companies, instead of worrying about, can we trust the data that we're collecting and mapping and reporting, they should be trusting companies like software companies to help them to automate that so that they can spend more of their resources and time on how to actually plan and execute the transformation to become a sustainable and responsible company for the future.
Eric, it's been a fascinating conversation. We could probably talk for another 20 minutes, but we've run out of time now. But thank you very much for your insights. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
Thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure being on this show with you. My final thought and advice for board members and executives listening to this show is that the future is here already. It's not something that is coming in 5 years, 1 year, 10 years. It's already here. What used to be someone else's problem is the responsibility of every single person, every single executive, every single board member. So I believe the most important advice I can give board members is make sure that your organization is thinking about how they can automate these traditional manual processes so that their resources, your resources, can be used to build processes and governance to build trust with their stakeholders, regulators, shareholders, customers, and employees that your company or your companies are making a defined transformation from what it used to be to a more sustainable and responsible company that will make this world a better place in the future.
Erik, thanks a lot for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to Erik Saito. He's the Senior Vice President and General Manager, EMEA and APAC at Workiva. I'm Brian Fernandez, and you've been watching and listening to Biztech C-Suite Conversation Show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.